get it going.
Okay.
Public walks in there.
The following is the agenda for the special open council meeting of the Borough of Pompton Lakes, Mayor and Council, Municipal Corporation in the County of Passaic. The meeting will begin at 7 p.m. on January 26, 2022 in the Municipal Building, 25 Lenox Avenue, Pompton Lakes. Consistent with the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, the meeting will be open for public comments. Public comments may be made at designated times during the meeting and may be submitted in writing to be read aloud during the meeting. Comments to be read at the meeting must be submitted at least 24 hours prior to the meeting by email or to the clerk's office, 25 Lenox Avenue, Pompton Lakes. Must be of a length that can be reasonably be read within the time limit for public comment.
Okay.
In
conformance with the Open Public Meeting Law, Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this meeting setting forth the time, date, place, and purpose of the special meeting through notice posted on the bulletin board of the Municipal Building, mailed, who have requested and paid for same, and mailed to the suburban traffic. Roll call, please.
Mayor Sarah.
Here.
Council President Polidori.
Here.
Councilman Begg.
Here.
Councilman Cruz.
Here.
Councilman DeLine.
Here.
Councilwoman Kent.
Here.
Councilman Bennett.
Here.
With us this evening is our Borough Administrator, Kevin Boyle, and myself. I was going to say the attorney.
Motion to open the meeting for public comments.
So moved.
Council President Polidori.
Second.
Councilman DeLine. Look, I can't use this councilman. It's just too difficult. I'm just going to call your name.
You got a 50-50.
I got 50 shots. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, Lauren, thank you for coming and make your presentation. Go ahead.
Alrighty. Lauren Vennon, I'm here on behalf of the Flood Advisory Board to present our 2021 River Hazard Assessment. To give a refresher on the program, the River Hazard Assessments are something that the Flood Advisory Board has been doing since 2010. We started at that time following flooding in 2005, 2007, 2010 to get out and assess the condition of the rivers, document what's going on, and see if we had problems and obstructions. Our first assessment in 2010, we had over 150 hazards and obstructions noted. For comparison, the map I'm going to show you tonight has about 35. So we've been doing a really good job. The borough has been doing a really good job. The hazard assessment that started in 2010 provided the documentation that kick-started the borough's stream cleaning operations, colloquially referred to as the river work. Through permitting by DEP, we've worked in conjunction with neighboring municipalities. We've worked on our own, we've worked with state funding, we've worked with borough funding. I think we've worked with some federal funding over the years. So it's been a intense and long-running effort. So we're 12 years in at this point. Starting, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago, we switched from biannual assessments to annual assessments to help satisfy the requirements of our CRS program. That's kind of the history. What you have up here now is this year's map. Now we document 3 types of hazards as we consider them. One is obstructions. Those can be downed trees, debris, any kind of trash, shopping carts, etc. that's noted in the river that's a channel blockage. We note shoals, which is the collection of soil sustaining some amount of plant growth, the mini islands in the rivers. And then we note erosion, and that includes damage to head walls, damage to stormwater outfalls. Our main concern is really the obstructions. So starting in, I believe, 2018, we switched from doing our assessment completely on foot to using drones or UAVs for a portion of the assessment and some of the field work. It saved quite a few hours of volunteer man hours. It's also allowed us better access to areas that are not accessible from the shore. There are some areas where private property comes up to the riverbank and you can't access that area unless you have permission. So this year we did not get the drone out before the trees leafed out, so we ended up having to cover some areas on foot as well just to double check our findings. So I'm going to go through our map here, just kind of orient you to what you're looking at. So north is this side, towards the side of the page. This is, of course, Pompton Lake, coming down to the dam. We have the Ramapo River snaking down on the border between Pompton Lakes and Wayne. Comes down to the tip of the south end at the confluence of the Pompton River. Here the Pequannock comes up on the other side, forming our border with Pequannock and then with Riverdale as it comes up along Riverdale Boulevard and comes up to the edge of town, across the Hamburg Turnpike, comes up at our border by 287. Down the center of town, we have the Wanacue, of course, starting up at the remnants of Lake Inez, behind the shopping center with Lidl, coming down through the center of town, behind the apartments, crossing Wanacue Ave, coming down into the area of Hirschfield Park. The Wanacue has several tight turns through it and a couple of branches in this area that always accumulate quite a bit of debris. The Wanacue, of course, comes down, meets the Pequannock at Van Ness Bridge. So that's your orientation, what you're looking at on the map. These red lines with your yellow highlighted text are how we divide the river into reaches. And these are the same reaches and the same divisions of the river that is used for the DEP permitting process to reference location on the river. So we use it this way. It helps with CRS. It helps with the borough engineer being able to take what we're showing and convey it into a permit application, convey it into a work plan for the contractor. When you look at this map here, you see all these white circles. All of these white circles are our incidents. If we zoom in on them, you'll see that they have a 3-letter descriptor and then a number. We keep it simple here. WAN is Wanacue. If we go over here, PEQ is Pequannock. And the smattering over here of RAMs are Ramapo. So this allows us to reference the photographs and reference locations. This map is produced using GIS software, so each of these data points can be pinpointed with latitude and longitude. So looking at this and going to the paper that you have, your Riverwork Action Plan, revised October 2021, this is our prioritization of where work should be started, of where the focus should be. We rarely have enough time in the season with our permit exclusions and weather delays, or enough funding to cover all obstructions on all rivers in every season. It's just not, it's too big of a job. This last several years, we have focused on the Wanacue. It doesn't look like that on the map, because that's where the most obstructions still are. The Wanacue, the nature of the land on either side, there's a lot more wooded land right up to the river as it comes through these bends. It collects a lot of debris. The Wanacue is not our priority for this year. We are actually asking that the focus for prioritization of river work this year be the lower Pequannock and then the Ramapo. And once these two areas are clear, move up to the upper Pequannock and then begin to tackle Hirschfield Park area and up through the upper Wanacue. That probably seems a little counterintuitive when you look at the map. When we look at the areas that experienced flooding in Tropical Storm Ida, it was not flooding that impacted residents and impacted roads and impacted potentially threatened houses or impacted houses. It was not in this area. It was primarily in these blocks and then to an extent down in this area.
That's also the low-lying area.
It is the low-lying area, and it's the area that's most impacted. As we found when we started this, those of you who have been following this program for a long time, you probably recall those really startling pictures of the debris dams down at the lower Pequannock that Ron Dunkos had taken. When those debris dams were removed, the standing water level on these rivers dropped. So we know that debris dams on the lower Pequannock have an impact throughout our system. If we prioritize and continue to prioritize the Wanacue year after year, we can spend our entire season of time and budget on this stretch and still not have the impact that we can have by clearing these debris dams. We only have a couple points down here because they're small, but they're significant. Now, I don't have the photos on hand to bring up to match these. It was turned over with the rest of our documentation when we submitted for CRS in August. If you walk the trails, you've certainly seen these. We end up with debris dams. We have large trees that come down. So we are asking that this be a priority, that this area here be a priority, and this is the southernmost reach of the Pequannock. And as you look at the reach guidelines, this is coming down to NCO 8. So we're asking for prioritization here. We're asking for prioritization of this gathering of
Interrupt for 1
trees.
second.
Yes.
Kevin, are permits let us work on any of the rivers or certain rivers at a certain time? All at one time, okay.
We have a collection of trees behind Stiles Park also. Now, I understand there is sometimes a little more public awareness of downed trees along the Wanacue because it's very highly visible. What the Flood Advisory Board would like to suggest is that there be consideration of handwork to remove smaller downed trees, the smaller, more visible ones that fall in the vicinity of the old swimming hole and gather up in this area. It might be possible either through DPW or smaller contractors without having to have the heavy equipment. There may be more cost-effective ways to hit some of these smaller areas.
So if I understand what you're saying, you're suggesting separate from the contractor we're using now to bring in another contractor.
I'm suggesting the borough explore ways of removing them without having to have the heavy machinery brought in to pull it out. I very much hesitate to suggest bringing DPW into anything like that because our DPW is very much pushed to their limit.
Yeah,
And I don't want to suggest that, but it's something that could be done.
our DPW is good at stuff that is laying on the land,
Mhm.
going in the water, that is not what they're going to do. So anything on the land, I would say yes, the DPW can remove that.
Mhm.
But in the water, obviously they couldn't.
Yes.
The contractor that we use works at one place at one time. I don't know if he's going to jump to different places at the same time. So that, I think we'd have to talk about a little bit.
There's logistics issues with the contractor we have, moving from one river to the next and then back and jumping around because he uses heavy machinery. He has to construct a construction entrance. There's staging and mobilization costs and time investments that make that less than ideal and not as cost effective. This is where if a assessment of this area, if anything can be identified that is particularly simple to remove without having to move the heavy equipment over. I do think coming through the area just above Hamburg Turnpike, which is coming right up through.
But you're still talking about going in the water to remove
Yeah,
it.
well, some of the ones that are coming up, when you stand at the bridge of Hamburg Turnpike, and you look upstream, up through, where are we here? And you look up through this area, you can very easily see that it's like a ladder across the river. And how much of it could be removed without actually, in the water is something that you would have to have whoever was doing the work assess and see.
So
where
you
the
think
comfort
that
level
our
is at.
DPW could do that or not?
I know that our DPW is very much at their limit with covering the responsibilities they have. So if you or the liaisons for DPW feel that it's a reasonable ask, then we would think that that was a great idea, but we don't want to say, hey, the DPW can do it because I don't know where their capabilities and their limits are on that. Just in terms of manpower and what they can do and what their
Kevin,
equipment
so
is.
we're reaching out with the DPW at least. Flood control is not really in the DPW's pocket of doing the work, is that correct?
They've never gotten involved.
Right, they've never been involved in it. Now, saying that, if a tree falls down on a resident's property that lays across the water, and the resident gives them permission to go on their property, they will drag it out of the property or through their property to get it out. But actually working in the river or near the river that has a residence, not involving a resident, they probably will not be doing. So let's take it, just so you understand that part. And then that would mean somebody else would have to go in and do that. And that would mean hiring somebody to do that, obviously. And then it would be involved funding, where the funding would come for that.
And that old swimming area that you're speaking of is quite deep.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, just the nature of it being a swimming hole, it's not consistent or predictable depths. And I understand there are definitely safety concerns with that. What we are saying, though, for the main contractor with the heavy machinery in the water, the lower Pequannock, and then the Ramapo are the areas we are asking that you consider for prioritization. And when the work plan is put in place with the borough engineer, to consider these areas as the areas of prioritization.
Now, he was down there, 2 years ago, correct? That's where he did the cleanup on the field?
Yes, and all the tires, the mountain of tires,
Right.
yes.
That was 2 years ago.
Yes, it was 2 years ago. It was into, spring of 2020, so it was 2 years ago. The work in that area was wrapped up last 2 years ago. And then the rest of the summer of 2020, and then last year, the Wanacue was the prioritization
Right, so
area.
the other side of it, just to keep in mind, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but perception to residents, right? You gotta take that into account, that they saw them working down there for a long time. If they don't see them working on other sections of the river, they kind of say, well, why are they only working on that section and not this section? Even though I understand you're pointing it out as a section that is important, that should be done. We gotta keep that in mind too, because we kind of deal with all the residents, right? Even though that is a serious area of the flooding part.
This area here, PQ8 and PQ7 have been down there for about 3 years now. So these have been, this section here has not been touched in a while.
So what did he
and
work on when he was down there?
He was more around this bend, and you'll see this section here is pretty clean.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's this section right, kind of at the end of Riverdale Boulevard, and then heading back towards the county property, towards Aquatic Park, if you're walking it from the trails where you can actually walk along the river. The area behind Stiles, now I'm not going to remember the name of the storm where that very large tree came down behind Stiles, but it has been down there since summer of 2020.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, recently, that's where I've gotten most of my complaints.
Yeah, it's very visible. There are areas that are absolutely awful.
Especially near the railroad track.
Yes, but are not very visible to residents, so you're not going to hear as much about them. There are areas that are really awful, but the banks on either side are pretty high, and immediately upstream the banks are higher, and we don't have as much flooding threatening residents immediately up from there. And my apologies as I'm pointing out your neighborhood also there, because I know that this neighborhood does experience flooding, but I don't believe it is at the extent of what was experienced this summer. Because this summer was the first time we had.
Most of my calls right now, the last year and a half, have been the Stiles area and the Garden Road area.
Okay.
On the Quantic side.
Yes, and that's coming in through, here's Garden Road, and yep, that's two,
And
three.
there is a lot of big trees also over there, which causes part of the problem.
Yeah, a spreadsheet was submitted to the borough clerk and to our CRS coordinator and our CRS consultant with this, that on each of these data points, there is a full set of information, including when it was observed, the conditions when it was observed, and the categorization of it as either a good, fair, or poor condition for the waterways. If you do look at that document, we determined poor to be when the river channel is more than 50% blocked. And we do have some that we consider to be poor based on the size of the downed tree and how far across the river it is.
Kevin, how easy is it to move Dave from one place to another?
Well,
again, I find out from Tom Barati where we are on commissioner job on the Wanacue and then go from there. You can't move, you gotta decide with.
Right, we gotta do
River and
it.
got 50 points, so, at this point in time, we'll probably do something, look at, I'll give Tom a copy of this, and we'll start to plan our 2022 program based on how much money I have in the budget and things of that nature.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, everything you presented is good information and important information. I don't see us having two teams working, so I don't think that's gonna happen. Where the first team works is what we'll talk about with the engineers and see how that goes. Right now, he still has to finish the Wanacue, is that
A
correct?
couple of stuff got to.
Yeah, he'll finish there and then we'll be moving, and that's where we'll talk about where he's gonna go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Did anyone else have?
Anybody got a question?
I just wanted to ask, how much did this preparation cost the borough? How much money?
Oh, nothing. So we use open sourced, and you're our liaison. We use open source software. Perhaps ironically, we use software that was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers called QGIS, and it is an open sourced GIS software, so there is no licensing fee. The drone survey that's done, the initial drone survey was donated professional services from a local surveyor. All of that allowed us to set up with georeference coordinates to start with. Subsequent drone surveying has been done by someone who volunteers through OEM, Tom Karitsis, who's also a special officer in town. So he has volunteered his time. We provide flash drives for him, but that cost doesn't go back to the borough. So this does not have any cost to the borough at all.
And I can speak, I've always said this, we have the most, and this goes to everybody sitting in the audience here, the most dedicated group of flood advisory board members that I've seen anywhere. And other mayors have said that to me when we go to meetings, so it's just so you all know that. They feel we're very knowledgeable, we have a lot to say, and a lot of good information. Now, we all know that we'll be switching Congress people in the next year. I thought I was making good progress with Congresswoman Sherrill about flooding in our area. That's unfortunate. I did reach out to her already about it and say, look, I think we were making good progress, and it's unfortunate that we'll be losing you, and I hope we are still getting that kind of attention when it switches. But, that's a big plus to this, because she was pushing for federal funding at some point to help us do all this work, which to me is key to this whole thing. If we can get federal funding, that would be big. And then I could bring in the other towns, the other mayors, we could do major, large projects, as you know, because we've spoken about it. So, that's another piece to this puzzle that's changing a little bit.
Yeah, we've discussed it at our last flood advisory board meeting, and we have been very fortunate in the level of responsiveness and communication that we've had. So make the most of that year and hope this next year, and hope that we can carry on as much as we can with, she'll still be representing several other Passaic Basin towns. So hopefully what benefits one part of the basin will benefit the rest of the basin.
And just so you know, we've reached out to DP about the trees on the dam. They're in the process of seeing how they're going to remove them. As we all know, that does not happen in 2 days. That'll take time, but they're aware of it. The gentleman that used to run the whole floodgate program for us that contacted me, John, has retired. I've met the new person. John, I can tell you, was very active with contacting me. He would always reach out to me when the gates were opening. I hope they continue to do that. If they don't, I will pressure them to continue doing that. But I can say when he did it, when they opened, he always let me know. And I usually would reach out and send it to our OEM director and to Lauren, to let everybody know. So hopefully they continue that cooperation of letting us know.
Well, thank you for keeping on them about that.
Yeah, because that, to us in town, that, the old-time residents know when the siren's going off and the gates are opening, they know what's going on. We do have a lot of new residents in town, especially in the south end. I got a lot of calls from people asking why sirens are going off at 2 in the morning, and they have no idea or no clue what that meant. And then when I tell them, they makes them even more nervous and more scared. They're probably better off not to know because it wasn't really going to flood them anyway. Again, that's on all of us up here and you guys a little bit to keep getting the message out about what that means.
We are trying to arrange for another public outreach session We had been trying to schedule it for February, but I think we may end up pushed back a little bit, possibly in the spring. It will be easier to have people feel comfortable attending, to get a public info session on helping people understand the flood insurance changes that are happening. And we are also hoping this spring that stormwater management focus will be able to resume our public workshops, the rain barrel workshops, the rain garden workshops. In fact, at our meeting tomorrow, the targeting of, where do we want to look at pushing and who's our target audience for green infrastructure, public awareness, and education. That's one of our topics for 2022.
Anybody got questions up here? Any other questions, concerns, comments? It's all good information. We thank you guys. We thank you for all the hard work. And, we'll stay in touch and we'll work with Kevin, with the engineers, and we'll see where we're going next on the river.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Okay. Motion to close the public session.
Motion.
Second. Councilman Benning, Councilman Cruz. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councilman Deline. And Council President Palatori. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming. We got about 5 minutes.